Welcome to today's video where we're going to learn about layers in Photoshop. But before we do that, we have to understand something about how to undo in Photoshop. Unlike Illustrator, where you had a very large number of undo options, in Photoshop the default is only 20. They're called 20 steps and they're located in your history panel. Now in my window, my history panel is located up here. But let's say this is not there when you open up Photoshop. To access it, you'd go up to Window and then find your history. Now in your history, I'm going to make this larger, you'll see all the steps I've taken so far, everything I've done in the program, but it doesn't go back very far. So let's say I've done 100 steps and I realize I messed up somewhere, I won't be able to fix it. So what I like to do is always set up my Photoshop to allow for a larger amount of undo. So we're going to do this together. So you're going to go up to Photoshop, Preferences, and hit Performance. And in Performance, you see I have mine set to 1,000. Yours will be at about the 20 mark, most likely. So you're just going to slide this over. I like to put 1,000, but I would at least do 200 to 300. That means you can keep all that memory of all the history of the states are just like steps. So you can keep 1,000 steps on record. That way, if you make any mistakes, you can go back. Now we're going to go on to the actual layers in Photoshop. Now in Photoshop, the way you access your layers is through your Layers panel, which should pop up automatically through the default. But in case it's not here, like every other panel in Photoshop, it can be accessed through your Window menu. You can pull up layers here. Now I like to pull my Layers menu out because sometimes I have quite a bit of layers and I don't like to have to scroll. So I'll make the Layers panel a little bit longer than the other panels here. And for this example, I want you to be able to see this. Now, this panel should always be out when you work because it makes your life so much easier. Unlike Illustrator, in order to move, edit, or do anything to any image in Photoshop, you must access its layer first. Whereas in Illustrator, you could separate layers if you wanted to. In Photoshop, you don't really have much of a choice. As mentioned in class, there are quite a bit of different types of layers available to you in Photoshop. The first being an image layer. I'm going to hide the rest of these so you can see. An image layer is made out of pixels. It's the one we'll be working with the most in class. Anytime you take a photo from the internet or you use a photo that you've taken, it is going to come in as an image layer. Another type of layer is a shape layer. As soon as you use the shape tool, a shape layer is formed. The great thing about it is if you double click on this layer, you can change the color easily. There is also something called a fill layer. A fill layer is great because you can add solid color, gradients, or patterns to your image. I chose to add a gradient here. Another type of layer in Photoshop is called a type layer. As soon as you activate your type tool and click on your canvas, a type layer is formed. You can tell it's a type layer because it has this T here, and it will often say the word or a description of what you've written here. Now the two layers that are a little bit harder to understand are called Smart Objects and Adjustment layers. Smart Objects are just images that were made in another program and placed into Photoshop. So this little post-it was made in Illustrator and I brought it in as a Smart Object, meaning if I change it or I need to make edits in Illustrator, I can double click on this and Illustrator will pop up and I can make those changes, and then those changes will be reflected back in my Photoshop document, which allows me to interchange vectors and rasters pretty easily and work with two programs at once. And adjustment layers allow me to make color changes, value changes to everything underneath it. So I didn't like my tone here, I wanted to brighten it up. So I made an adjustment layer and I just brightened everything. If you can see that layer, everything's a little bit more vibrant. Anything underneath this layer is edited. Now for today's activity, what I need you to do is hover your mouse over all the different components of your layers menu and fill in that handout that was given. Once you're done with that, try to make a document that contains all 6 different types of layers.